up a dive. Feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's so I remember right. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Come to VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
What the heck happened there? I'm not sure why there was a delay there. Maybe it's the new StreamYard system, which actually sends us out both on vertical and on horizontal on YouTube now. So maybe that's why there was a slight lag. Regardless, welcome to Talking Weird, all my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and I'm delighted that you're joining me for the next hour or so tonight. Maybe you're listening in or watching live when we go out Thursday, 9 p.m. Central US time, or perhaps you're watching the show where it's archived on YouTube and Facebook and X after that time, or perhaps you're listening to us on one of the many audio podcast platforms where the show drops the following Friday, i.e. tomorrow, from where I'm sitting now. Maybe it's morning where you are, maybe it's evening, lunchtime, whatever time you're watching, listening, wherever in the world you are. Thank you for being here with me. I really appreciate it. I won't chat too much tonight, except to say that the Northwoods is wonderfully mysterious at this time of the year. I got to go outside last night and see some of the northern lights, which was amazing, and hear all kinds of weird, creepy things in the woods that surround my property at the same time. So it's fitting perhaps this time of the year to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight, one of the original and perhaps most frightening Bigfoot stories. We'll be looking at that in a little bit. We'll be looking and talking about the film, and we really have this current, I suppose, revisitation of it thanks to tonight's guest. He's a filmmaker, podcaster, and storyteller from Temecula, California, which I probably mispronounced, whose work explores the edges of folklore, mystery, and belief. He is best known for his series Bigfoot, The Road to Discovery, a multi-part exploration of the cultural and personal significance of Sasquatch. After earning his BA in screenwriting from California State University, Long Beach, he became an integral part heart of Small Town Monsters, where he has produced a wide slate of documentaries ranging from UFO encounters to Sasquatch legends. Beyond film, he is the co-creator and host of Cryptid Campfire, a long-running podcast that has reached thousands of listeners with conversations on folklore, cryptids, and the unexplained. Tonight, as I mentioned, he'll be talking about his brand new documentary from Small Town Monsters, The Siege of Ape Canyon, which is absolutely fantastic. So I'm delighted to welcome back to Talking Weird, Eli Watson.
Hello.
Greetings, man. I'm so appreciative of you joining me. Particularly, it's just after your new film dropped. It was like yesterday or the day before it became available.
Yeah, I think the day before. Yeah.
It's exciting times.
Yeah, it's good to be back, man. Good to be here. I think this my third time on your show.
It's your third time. It's 2 years to the week since we had you on, and I didn't plan that. I only realized.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's crazy stuff. Now, I have the trailer. I don't know if you'd like to play the trailer up front, because I've got so much I want to talk to you about the movie, but maybe we could set the tone for the audience out there to encourage them to go watch this incredible film and to give them a taste of it before we spend the next hour chatting about it.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Awesome.
The Ape Canyon story is really one of the classics of Bigfoot.
This isn't just a Bigfoot story. This is the Bigfoot story.
What happened is that there was this core group headed by this guy, Marion Smith. His son, Leroy Perry Smith, his son-in-law, Fred Beck, a family friend named John Peterson, August Johansson, and another friend, Mac Rhodes. They established a claim for a gold mine in 1922. It's called the Vanderwhite Mine. Working up there year-round is not impossible, but you're not going to get anything done. Let's build a cabin. It was 10 by 20, build this cabin strictly by hand, maybe with block and tackle. It was a formidable cabin.
We got towards evening, and when they went to bed in the cabin that night after it got dark,
There's this large impact on the cabin. They all look out through the hole, and they can see 6 or 7 in the moonlight, 6 or 7 of these large creatures dancing around the cabin, and all hell breaks loose.
The creatures are throwing rocks, they're climbing on top of the roof, they're trying to get in, they're trying to dig underneath the cabin, they're beating at the door.
that one of the creatures reached through the chinking and grabbed the axe and was pulling it out. In the morning, when it got light, it had stopped, and they had decided that that's it, we're out of here.
There's large rocks scattered everywhere. There's footprints, large human-like footprints, 13, 14, 15 inches long everywhere.
I think the imagery is what draws people to the story.
There was no evidence of it, really. It was just a story.
Did this actually happen? Were these guys real? What if there's some sort of evidence left behind of the cabin or the mine?
It's so great. I loved it so much. I told you briefly before we went live how much I enjoyed it. And we're going to be talking about the actual film itself, I think, at some length tonight. But maybe Ape Canyon's been one of my favorite Bigfoot stories for a long time. I grew up in the 70s and into the 80s when you would see it mentioned in so many Bigfoot documentaries. But it's something that's not talked about quite as much today within the Sasquatch community or just in general Bigfoot lore. Maybe tell me what drew you to this story and how you first became aware of it and what made you want to go and make this incredible movie about it.
Oh gosh, that's a long story. Well, first off, thank you for the compliments. This movie is definitely what I consider the pinnacle of, like, if I had to say if my Small Town Monsters career was building up to anything, I would say it was the Siege of Ape Canyon.
I agree.
But yeah, I mean, dude, the first time I heard about this story, gosh, probably sometime in college when I got really into the whole Sasquatch subject, because you have a random Temecula story. Nice. Also, you didn't pronounce it that bad when you introduced me. So
That's Flat Rockland, Matt Auckland, who's a good friend of the show and a regular and a guest as well. And he says he has a Temecula story. So maybe he can share it in the chat.
yeah, share it in the chat. Um, yeah, so when I started getting into that podcast, I started doing Cryptid Campfire. That's probably when I first heard about um, the Ape Canyon story. It's interesting. This almost made it into the movie. I went back as I was making this movie. I went back and I listened to that episode. It was one of the earlier episodes, and man, it was just full of total misinformation, like totally just way off. Um, so yeah, and then I started getting into the Bigfoot community, meeting the Olympic Project. Of course, Mark Marcel is part of the Olympic Project. And that's when I first met him, was back in 2021. And I had the idea in the back of my mind. It would be cool to do like an Ape Canyon movie, but it wasn't on the docket, and I started thinking about it more and more and more as I did the Olympic Project series, Bigfoot: The Road to Discovery. And I had a vision in my head, which would, there's 10 episodes of that show. Most of that covers my time with the main Olympic Project, Shane Corson, Todd Hale, Chris Spencer, Rebecca Slick, Derek Randalls, of course, can't forget him. But I wanted to kind of create this kind of tapestry of stories that are all set in the Pacific Northwest. That's what you think of when you think of Sasquatch, is the Pacific Northwest. I'm very attracted to the Pacific Northwest. It's wildly different from Southern California. And, so I made that series. I did a special on Cliffs Museum, the North American Bigfoot Center, which is a phenomenal museum. And the crown jewel of it would be the Siege of Ape Canyon, which at that point I was still calling kind of the Ape Canyon movie. Like, it didn't have a name yet. And so I started talking with Mark about it, and then Seth got on board, and Seth was originally going to direct. And I just made a blog post about this, talking about this kind of process. He called me one day and told me, he said, Eli, I've been really thinking about it, and I think it makes sense for you to make this movie. You're the one who knows Mark really well, and you're already going down to the cabin site, because that was the discussion. Seth would lead the interviews. I would kind of do the in the field stuff, Alex and I, and Seth was like, it just makes sense for you to do it. And I know that probably hurt, as an artist. I know, like, there's some stories you don't want to give up. And I could tell this was one of those ones that he did not want to give up, but he did. And he put me in charge. And so I was able to make the crowning jewel and do that tapestry the way I wanted to do it. And so that's kind of how it all came together.
I'm so glad Seth let you, because Seth's a wonderful filmmaker too, but there's something about this film that you just hit the tonality and everything of it just right. I do think it's the film that you should have made. We'll get into the importance of Mark Marcel in a minute. I was trying to dig out before, because I have somewhere in my library here, his booklet he did on Ape Canyon all those years ago, which is fantastic. And I vaguely know Mark only through chat, but he's always seemed like a wonderful guy. And that really comes out in the show. And that's what I want to ask you about now. One of the things I loved about this, and I started to mention when we were talking beforehand, but we had to jump into the live, that this might be my favorite Small Town Monsters documentary. I have a very soft spot for the Boggy Creek Monster, because it's the first one I ever saw, and Lyle Blackburn's so fantastic in that. He narrates as well the opening, Lyle, in Ape Canyon, right?
Yeah.
So it was great to have his voice in it. But this film, what I love about it so much is, I think the realm of paranormal and cryptozoological and ufological documentaries focuses so much on the phenomenon, but I think it's so hard to capture that. I think the wonderful strength of this film, and what makes it so engaging, is that it focuses so much on Mark Marcel's journey, on the significance of the Ape Canyon story to the people that you guys tracked down, who are family members and descendants of the original miners, as well as on your own journey. And I love how, I mean, that's something people can engage with. It's hard to engage with a Bigfoot or a UFO or a ghost or whatever, but when there's a human aspect which the camera, shifts towards, I find it myself as just an audience member and also as a filmmaker, I find that stuff so much more engaging. Was that something I'm guessing you must have intended it, but at what stage did you go, this is the direction of the movie?
Oh, I always knew it. So yeah, I kind of skipped over this in the story. 2021 is when I first met Mark. And gosh, I guess I've known him for 4 years now. But every time I went up to the Pacific Northwest, it was always, I always made a trip out to Mark's place. And Mark and I just hit it off like two peas in a pod. I mean, that dude is like my older brother or something, and a person for years. By the time I made the movie, we filmed in July of last year. I had already known him for 3 years. When you know a person for that long, you talk to them, you get a sense of not only their Ape Canyon passion, like he says in the film, it's kind of his midlife crisis. There's so much more to Mark than just Ape Canyon, like his whole wedding story, how he met his wife. He got married underground, like all of that stuff I had heard, being around Brad, his neighbor. I mean, I knew if I was going to tell this story, I had to include Brad. I wasn't going to not include Brad, and so it was just like, to me, the Ape Canyon story was always more about Mark than it was about proving that gold miners were attacked in 1924. I mean, the case is 101 years old at this point. Mark was able to verify that there was a cabin, that there were miners there, but you can't verify that they were indeed attacked by Sasquatch. The paper trail is very interesting and would allude to something traumatic happening, but we can't say 100% certainty that, they were attacked by Sasquatch. So it was like you said, it's hard to engage with that. But Mark is such a dynamic person. I was like, this is the Mark Marcel movie,
And that was the absolute right choice, the direction that you took the film. We have a question here from Flat Rockland, which I'll slightly spin into another one. And he asks, so you're saying you talk about the lady in white and the arrow in the sky. And I guess perhaps we can talk a little bit about that, but there's an aspect to Ape Canyon. I mean, I guess, I don't know if you want to give the quick overview of the attack story before I ask what I'm about to ask, because there might be listeners today who aren't aware of Ape Canyon. You know what I mean? I don't know if you want to give a quick synopsis of what actually happened in a couple minutes, and then I'll throw the question so the audience, so everybody listening knows what we're actually talking about.
Yeah. So, in 1924, on the eastern slopes of Mount St. Helens, there were several miners, 5 or 6. I should know this, but there were miners down on the eastern slopes of Mount St. Helens. They had a gold claim, and they had blasted a shelf into the side of the mountain there to build a cabin, this big log cabin. And as they were there for a period of 2 to 3 years before something happened. But there were strange events happening, strange sounds, footprints being found. They were getting a little spooked, but not enough to make them leave. And so the day before, Leroy Perry Smith, who was the youngest miner, actually had an encounter with what they called a mountain devil. You have to keep in mind that the term Sasquatch was not yet coined, or Bigfoot. That wouldn't come about until the 1950s. So they called them mountain devils, for lack of a better term. He saw this mountain devil. He took a couple shots at it. And it went down over the side of Ape Canyon and either fell down or kind of like crouched down. Well, the other miners who were in the cabin at that moment heard the shots. They came by. They were like, what's going on? And they all retreated back to the cabin. Well, that night, they were all on edge, and they start hearing impacts on the cabin from up above, and there's these large rocks coming down on the cabin, and they peer up through the window, and they see these ape men, these mountain devils, that are now, there's multiple of them, that are throwing rocks down on the cabin. And then they come down, and they're trying to break into the cabin. They're trying to get through the roof. They're trying to dig a hole underneath the cabin. They're breaking through the window, and this attack lasts all night long. They are unsuccessful in their attempt to get inside the cabin, but and all the miners survived. In the morning, they find all these footprints on the ground, these like 15, 16-inch footprints, all these rocks all over, spread out all over the ground, you know, the ruins of their cabin as it's been decimated through the night. And they're just like, we got to get out of here. So they leave. They end up telling the press about it accidentally. The story goes nationwide. This is in 1924. So that's a big deal in 1924. They close their mining claim. They decide, the majority of them do not come back. I think two of them, Fred Beck and Leroy Perry Smith, do come back a week later with a news crew. And there's some wonderful high quality photos of that return trip that are included in this film. But yeah, that's kind of the story. More details emerged later in the 1960s. 1966, I believe, Fred Beck published a book, I Fought the Ape Men of Mount St. Helens, co-authored with his son, and in which he kind of reveals more details that seem to explain that there's more supernatural things at work going on with the Ape Canyon story, which is very interesting because none of that is included in the original news press or anything like that. So
yeah, I find that part fascinating. I think that's what Flat Rockland was alluding to about the arrow in the sky and the lady in the white, and these accusations of Fred Beck being a spiritualist and somehow this being some type of spiritualist hoax or something weird. There's all these different angles. To me, what I find fascinating about that later Fred Beck account that you talked about that he wrote with his son is that it gives an awful lot of credence to people who approach the Sasquatch or Bigfoot phenomenon from the woo camp or from the paranormal interdimensional camp, because the story seems to back up the idea that the ape men weren't necessarily just physical flesh and blood hominids, you know what I mean, or undiscovered North American ape men or whatever the traditional flesh and blood Bigfoot researchers have suggested. That later retelling of Fred Beck, whatever the reality of it or not, certainly puts the Ape Canyon story or reimagines or reposits the Ape Canyon story within the kind of woo camp, which has become increasingly, I don't say woo in a disparaging way, because if anything, I'm closer to that interpretation myself, but that's what's used in the community, right? It puts it closer to that supernatural, paranormal, interdimensional approach to Sasquatch. And I'm glad that it was included in the story, in the film.
well, yeah, you have to. I mean, that is a big chunk of the story that is often told. You know, I think, oh yeah, Jared Mitchell, he is in the film. Hey, Jared. Yeah, the thing about Fred Beck's account, I say it co-authored by his son. Fred Beck was involved in some spiritual activities, I would say, like Ouija boards, Ouija cards, tarot cards, you know, that the like, you know. His son seemed to think he was a kind of savant, Edgar Casey type, you know, perhaps I don't, you know, I'm a paranormal guy myself. I do believe in that, you know, I've had my own experiences with that. I think, so I don't put it past that maybe Fred Beck did have some of these abilities. Maybe he did, but to the point where he was an Edgar Casey type, I don't know, you know. That kind of puts him on a a big level, you know what I mean? So his son co-authored, and as it's explained and kind of investigated in the movie, which is like one of those things, you can read that book and just take it at face value, or you can dig in deeper into the story and find that the intentions behind the writing of that pamphlet 40 years later in 1967, 1966, wasn't necessarily Fred's retelling of the story, but more so his son. And so I think that's where it gets interesting.
No, I think the fascinating thing about a story like this, which has such deep historical roots and all these different interpretations, is all these different angles. And again, that's a real credit to you that you hit these in the film. We had a question here which we'll address quickly, and that is, was there any physical evidence of the supposed Sasquatch found at the site, such as footprints, blood, or anything that backed Fred and the miner's story? Were boulders found? Well, again, it's 100 years after, as you were just saying, but maybe you
Right.
can maybe you can talk about some
Well,
of the physical evidence that was found there, Eli.
yeah, well, I would say that that news crew that came out in 1924, a week after it happened, did find footprints. Um, I'm not sure if they casted one or not, but they did find footprints. They did find the rocks there, and that's another thing. We think of them as boulder-sized rocks. That's another thing that came from Fred Beck's uh, pamphlet. And 40 years later, when pressed, his son did admit that they were not boulder-sized rocks, but rather softball-sized, So it's like those little things, they kind of seep from the credibility of that I Fought the Eight Men of Mount St. Helens book. But yeah, so that would be the time frame, a week after the event happened. In that time frame is when most of that physical evidence would have been found. What Mark did find is he found the foundation of the cabin. So here's more backstory for you. So, like I said, after that event, none of the miners returned up there. And, 40 years goes by. It's exposed to all the elements. The roof probably collapsed in on itself from the snow load. And, 40 years does a number on the woods. Anything in the woods is, it's not gonna last too long.
Absolutely.
So, his book comes out. I Fought the Eight Men of Mount St. Helens. People like Peter Byrne, they start to get interested in the story. John Green starts to get interested in the story. John Green interviewed Fred Beck, and they attempt to find the cabin. They can't find the cabin. There was rumors you could see it from the trail. People are looking out, and you can see the cabin site from the trail, but there is no cabin. So you're not going to see really anything, And then you have to keep in mind too, so that would have been the late 60s, 1980 eruption happens. While the cabin site itself was protected from the 1980 blast due to just the natural geography of the area, I think a lot of people just assumed, well, now it's really gone because it's probably buried, And it was Mark, land surveyor. I think that helped out a ton, and he was able to locate first by locating tree stumps. Looking for tree stumps in an area where it had never been logged. So you find these old tree stumps, and you're going to be close. He finds a big tree that kind of matches the description. He brings his metal detector, and he finds all these old nails. He finds old spoons. He finds the blade of a saw. That kind of had to be it, So that's kind of what's going on, So when we went down there, I mean, the foundation of the cabin itself is under the soil. There's little bits and pieces of it sticking up out of the ground, but for the most part, it's hidden away. The one thing Mark could not find was actually the mine itself. Yeah, as Jared says, it's very difficult to get down there. Incredibly difficult. Might have been the most dangerous thing I've ever done.
We can talk about some of the perils in a minute if you want to come back to that. Because even when I
Yeah.
was watching it, I thought this can't end well. I'm like, this looks
There's a lot of things happened on going down there. But yeah, the mine itself, they had been there for a couple of years and they were mining this whole time, and Mark, for the life of him, could not find it. And so through another wild chain of events, the great grandsons of the Leroy Perry Smith, um, Jared Mitchell, Braden Mitchell, Jake Mitchell, they all go down, following Mark's directions, which I think is even crazier because I wouldn't have been able to find it on my own, even if Mark had given me directions. And they found it, and they ended up finding the mine. And sure enough, it's there in the stone. They're finding, what looks like old marks on the wall, potentially what, probably would have been blasted out with dynamite,
just crazy.
And so I think, you find the foundation of a cabin, you find all these old artifacts, and you find a mine. It all matches the story, right? In the exact area that it's supposed to be in. I think Mark definitely found it, and the Mitchells definitely found the mine. So
It's an impressive amount of research that Mark Marcel did to bring this story to life in the modern world. We have a question here from a Crash Course Cryptozoology, and that is the cover for the book pamphlet recounting the story I Fought the Ape Men of Mount St. Helens has always interested me. Was that cover art an eyewitness drawing, or was it drawn by Beck's son? And it's a Bigfoot face on the cover, just for people who haven't seen the book.
yeah, that's a great question, and maybe Mark is texting me here off screen. Maybe he can provide some additional info on who drew that.
I have no doubt Mark would know.
Mark would know, right?
Drop Eli a text, Mark, because you did tell me you were going to be listening. So yeah,
yeah.
We can respond to that question. But was there? I won't ask insurance questions as a filmmaker because that's terrifying. At a personal level, were you concerned when you were going down there though? Like, were you like, I don't know if this is a safe thing to do, to take my crew down there and shoot down off this? I mean, God bless you that you did, because it's a fantastic movie. But there must have been moments where you were like, I'm pushing the limits here.
Yes. Quick. The cover was drawn by Ronald Beck, Fred Beck's son.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, the trek down, I had been warned by Mark and by Shane that it was a dangerous trip, and there's a lot going on there, and I was actually getting stress dreams. So my brother actually went with me. My brother plays Leroy Perry Smith in the recreations. So
fantastic. I didn't know.
And my brother plays I guess he would be his father-in-law, Marion Smith. So it's kind of fun that my family is also in this movie. So
that is a lot of fun.
Yeah. But yeah. Oh no, that would be his father. Marion Smith was his father. Leroy Perry Smith, they have the same last name. I don't know what I'm thinking. So yeah, but kind of cool that I also got father-son dynamic in the recreations, but yeah, so my brother was actually there on Mount St. Helens with me, going down into the canyon, and I had a stress dream about a week before where I was climbing up out of the canyon and I heard my brother go, "Whoa." And I turned around and I looked, and my brother was wearing a backpack and he had lost his balance and the pack was pulling him back and he ended up falling down into the canyon.
Gosh.
And I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, holy crap, this cannot happen. And so, I'm a little superstitious. So when we were there was indeed a backpack, pretty heavy pack. And everyone else was like, oh, I can carry that pack for you, Eli. And I was like, no. And I didn't tell anyone about the dream because I didn't want to like speak it into existence, and so I was like, if we're going down there, I'm wearing the pack down and up. And I did,
Oh, wow.
Huh?
Well, I just said, wow.
Yeah. I didn't want anyone to I didn't want that dream to come true. And funny thing too, there's that shot at the end of the trailer where I'm filming Mark going down. And my camera was in a sling bag, and I had the sling bag around me, threw the backpack on. Actually, let me go back. So that was my intention, to have that kind of setup. And so the sling bag was on the ground. I threw the backpack on first. The backpack caught the strap of the sling bag, and I didn't notice it. And I threw the backpack on, and it flung the sling bag with the camera off the side of the canyon. And I thought at that moment, like, I am totally screwed. Like, I'm going to have to tell Seth that we can't film this movie now because the camera's gone. And it's sort of, yes, you have heard about the coyote dream at Bluff Creek. Crazy stuff. Yeah, sometimes my dreams are weird, man. Luckily, it got caught on like a bush or something, and we had walkie-talkies. The Mitchells had already gone down, and I told them, hey, I lost my camera. And they're like, oh, we'll go look for it. And I'm like, what? And I just see them trekking across the side, no fear, and it's like, you see that, and you're like, first off, when you're there, you're like, who would build a cabin and a mine down here in this place? And then you see Jared and Braden just trekking across it like it's flat ground, and you're like, oh, their grandpa. Yeah, their grandpa would do that. They would probably do that. And they found it, and it was still intact. And the movie, we proceeded on down, and I was slipping and sliding all the way down there. A couple of times I thought I was gonna die, but it's all fine and dandy. We were there at the cabin site. I don't want to spoil the movie too much, but my friend Tyler Hall, he ended up having an accident with a knife, cutting himself open, and that was just totally, we were all so focused on not falling that we were not paying attention to what else could go wrong, and yeah, that's all in the movie, not the camera bit, but that bit is in the movie where Tyler cuts himself open, and it's just like, wow, that's crazy. And like, you couldn't ask for like a worse place for that to happen,
Yeah, in the middle of nowhere, and so far from any help. And the film deals with that, but we won't spoil it anymore. I have a question for you, and then I'll throw it to a couple of questions in the chat, because I've got a few that have built up. And that is, what was it like when you actually got to that cabin site, like ground zero of arguably one of the most important canonical kind of myths of Bigfoot lore, one of the key stories in the development of the way that we look at Sasquatch today? What was it like being there at this site?
It was pretty surreal. I mean, the first thing Tyler and I said to each other, we always think of that, when people think of Ape Canyon, they probably think of that Frank Frazetta-esque, I don't know if it was Frazetta who drew that or painted that, but that very dramatic shot, you have, the ape man up here throwing the rocks down. When you get to the site, you realize, oh, the depictions are all wrong. They have like always been completely wrong. So yeah, seeing that, it's definitely a lot steeper than you would think. It's literally on the side of a mountain. It's not, they had to blast a shelf in order to build the cabin. That should tell you, like, I wonder where they were standing when they did that. but yeah, I mean, it's being there, and all those trees are those old growth trees, like Mark had said, had never been logged before. I don't even know how you would get logging equipment down there in the first place. That area survived the eruption. I mean, so you're kind of transported back in time. You're seeing the same trees that they saw just 100 years later.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, that's definitely an area where Sasquatch is. I mean, that's even talked about a little bit in the movie with Brad. Brad had an experience of hearing stuff. They found footprints. Actually, they found footprints on 2 occasions. And there is a cast from up there.
You kind of answered something.
Yeah, I'm kind of answering that. Around the cabin, I would bet that they're down there. No one's staying down there, but yeah, the Mark has reported activity. I have reported activity from that area, from that trip. Just some mind-blowing stuff is going on still in that area. I mean, and even on the other side of the mountain, I talk about this in my series, Bigfoot, The Road to Discovery. You have the North Fork Survivors Museum, led by Joe Bongiovanni, who is doing research up there. Chris Spencer and Rebecca were doing research there back in the day. There is Sasquatch activity on Mount St. Helens. Definitely, 100%.
I think I have heard once upon a time, it's probably some weird apocryphal kind of tale, but that when Mount St. Helens erupted, there were Bigfoot bodies that were dragged out of there, which had been, killed in the eruption or some such.
Yeah, I've also heard the same. I dedicate a good chunk of one of the episodes of The Road to Discovery about that particular tale.
Wow.
I don't put a whole lot of stock into it. When you look at some of the historical pictures, it's just completely blasted. So that story, there's kind of 2 stories meshed into one. One that people saw a helicopter going up into the air carrying all the bodies of the charred remains of these Sasquatches. But there's also this tale of one was found still alive. And so they were able to drive it around the destroyed zone and able to, find others. It was going in caves looking for other ones, and it's like, it's so fantastic because you look at the photos of the aftermath of that eruption. No, people were barely walking through there, much less driving or getting helicopters in, helicopters were flying over. Yes, absolutely. Were they landing? I don't think so.
And loading up massive Bigfoot carcasses.
Yeah, so
We have another question from Professor Horace Smith, who's Professor Emeritus of Astronomy and Physics at Michigan State University. He's a good friend of the show, and he's been on before, and he always has very insightful questions. He asks, are there private documents about the event dating to the 1920s, or the newspaper accounts all we have from that time period? Mining archives is safer than finding the mine. So it's kind of a question and a comment.
It's true. Private documents about the event, I'm not sure. If there are, I don't think they've been found. So I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, that's always the trouble with historical cases. I did a historical case about a UFO cult here in my hometown of Temecula.
I love that film, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we talked about that. Yeah. So, and even then I found a cabin with that one too, also on the side of a mountain. But one of the frustrating things about that is I had found out that there were documents from that time period written by the people who were there, but could not find existing copies of those to this day, and that happened in the 1940s and the 1950s, Mark here says that mining documents exist in Skamania County archives. Mining documents exist, but I think what the questioner was asking was maybe, journal entries, private thoughts about the particular incident, that I don't know. That I don't know. And maybe there are, but are they still in existence? And if they are, who has them? You know?
Right. That was something I was aware of in the film as well, that the granddaughter of one of the miners had never heard the story throughout family history. Like, you guys essentially introduced her to the story of Ape Canyon. And then she became really fascinated, and it became a massive part of her life, but before that, she just was oblivious to it.
Well, I think that too, that speaks to the power of that event. No matter which way you want to look at it. It was either a hoax, they made up the story, and, they ended up closing their mining claim that same day, the day they came off the mountain. That is in record. So what would be the reason for that? They've been working this mine for years and years and years, and they just decide randomly to make up a wild story to close down their claim. I mean, I'm sure you could just close down your claim without making up a story. And so, but I think that speaks to the power of that event being so, out of the ordinary, so frightening, so horrifying, that they were like, we're not coming back and we're not going to talk about this. And they did not talk about that, even to their own family members,
Yeah, it'd be a difficult thing, particularly back in the early 1920s, when Bigfoot hadn't become a cultural phenomenon yet. Like, now we have language that we can use to instantly explain what we saw. Where we saw a bunch of Bigfoot attacking the cabin and everybody knows what it is, but, like, mountain devils, ape man, you had to try to back then you can tell they're trying to work out the way to describe what these things are that are attacking. There isn't already this preset cultural expectation of, these things in the woods.
Right. Right. They called them mountain devils. And I think, ape men, I thought the ape men of Mount St. Helens, the term Sasquatch, the term Bigfoot, in the 1920s, they didn't exist. In the late 1960s, probably still not as widely known as it is now,
Yeah, I always find it interesting how the Bigfoot phenomenon, we think it's been here. Well, the actual phenomenon, as far as people experiencing things, might have been here for a long time, but the cultural phenomenon is relatively new. As I think I mentioned to you before, and anybody who watches this show regularly knows that I'm currently making a feature documentary about Ray Palmer, who, amongst other things, launched Fate magazine. And funnily enough, last night when I was looking at the Northern Lights, I happened to check my mailbox because I hadn't that day, and the latest issue of Fate was waiting for me. And I love the fact that something that was founded back in 1948 still exists today, the longest running paranormal magazine on the planet. But I have a big back catalogue of Fate magazines here, particularly during Ray Palmer's run before he sold his interests to his to the co-editor and co-publisher Curtis Fuller. But when you look at those first 80 or so issues of Fate magazine, if I asked somebody today, "Oh, what do you think was on Fate magazine?" They'd be Bigfoot would come up as one of the things they would say. But in those first, like, 70, 80 issues, the only thing resembling Bigfoot on the cover of one of them is and it's at one of the later, some of the art was divided into 3, so it would have, like, ghosts and flying saucers and something else. The only one is one of the Yeti, the abominable snowman, because we were aware and we were talking about the abominable snowman in the 40s into the 50s. But Bigfoot was not a cultural phenomenon here at all. It wasn't even, I think it literally took up until it wasn't really until the 60s that this thing emerged as a point of interest in the American paranormal community. In fact, when it appeared here first, people would compare it to the Yeti. They would compare it to the abominable snowman. It'd be like America's Yeti, America's abominable snowman. Like, it's so weird to think that not that long ago, Bigfoot wasn't a thing.
Yeah, I mean, you even read Ivan Sanderson's book. What is it?
Yeah, it's got, like, I've got it on my shelf too. It's like it's got, like, abominable snowman.
Abominable Snowman legend come to life or something like that.
Yeah.
But he has a chapter on Sasquatch, but the chapter is titled abominable snowmen of America.
There you go.
You know, it's like, wow, you know.
Because today more people are probably familiar with the term Bigfoot or Sasquatch than they are with Yeti. I mean, people know what Yeti is as well, but if you saw something in the woods here, you wouldn't go, "It was a Yeti, but an American version." You know, you would just say,
Yeah,
"It's a Bigfoot
yeah,
or a Sasquatch."
right.
So there's been, and so that really that I think illustrates more than anything else that when Ape Canyon happened, there was no cultural context for this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely not. Yeah. Um, yeah, but that's just one of the, it's a highly fascinating story, case, you know, and it's just like, you know, and I would argue too, you know, again, I wrote a blog post about this, but the story itself, I would say, didn't end in 1924. You know, the story is everything else that happened afterwards. Uh, yeah, Robert Morgan, what a legend. But you know, the story also includes Fred Beck and Ronald Beck's pamphlet. Um, yeah, nice. Totally not supposed to do that. Uh, um, and then, you know, I make the argument that the story continued with Mark Marcel and this whole thing with the Mitchells getting involved and you know Betty Mitchell finding out about the story. I mean, the story created waves throughout time, and that's kind of too like what the movie is about too, right? It's like the Ape Canyon story is more than just what happened in 1924. If that makes sense, if you're following me.
It absolutely is. I think the film travels through generations and through multiple people who are interested in this. I mean, again, I can't tell you how much I loved it. There's an interesting question here. Did the other miners give interviews and accounted the same way that Fred did about the event?
Not in the same way, because none of them wrote pamphlets. But like I said, well, Fred Beck and Leroy Smith went back up about a week later. They gave the same account. Yeah, Albert Ostman happened the same year. That's interesting. Yeah, so they went back out there about a week after they gave the same story to the press. Like I said, they found footprints, they found the rocks, you know, they saw the cabin. Um, but other than that, I mean, if they didn't say anything to the press, we don't really have anything else from the other miners. So, yeah.
There was another interesting question here. Just see if I can't find it. We're getting there's a lot of activity in the chat tonight, which is awesome. No, I can't see it at the moment, but there was something I wanted to ask you or talk to you about just then, because I hadn't even really thought about that. We talk a lot. Cultural contamination fascinates me. The idea that one story becomes another story. It does, right?
Yeah.
Somebody pointed out that Albert Osterman's story happened the same year as Ape Canyon. I'm not sure. Did Osterman come out in 24 and talk about that though? I think he came out years later and talked about it. So I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't. You might know the timeline better than I do, Eli. Sasquatch isn't my wheelhouse.
I'm not sure. I know that one of the first interviews he ever gave was to John Green. I think maybe he did an interview with Patterson as well. But yeah, I don't think he would have told. I mean, even the way he talks to John Green about it, he's very closed about it. You know, he doesn't share all the details, and I think there's that kind of level of old school politeness about it, you know, that I don't know if he would have said anything back in the 1920s. Somehow, some way, through the grapevine, John Green heard about it. So he must have said something to somebody back then.
Right.
But yeah, it's an interesting story.
I don't think it went through over the news wires or whatever the equivalent was, like Ape Canyon did, though. Like you used to say in the documentary, how you were finding Ape Canyon stories not just in the Pacific Northwest in papers there, but how it had kind of spread across the country.
Yeah, I don't think the Ostman case was like that. No. So
I received a message from Mark in Facebook then. He said, "Re Fate magazine and Ivan Sanderson." Maybe Ivan Sanderson wrote that piece I'm talking about in Fate magazine. I'd have to go and pull it out. I
could
can't
be.
remember. I've got so many Raymond
Yeah.
publications in my office. I'm drowning. I'm drowning, drowning in them. Do you find, I'm sure you do, but there's something captivating or something that captures you as a filmmaker or as a scholar or however you pursue this material when you bite into something? Did you find Ape Canyon, obviously you're having dreams about your brother falling to his doom in there, but did you find it became something that like took over your life for like the period in the lead up, pre-production and development throughout the film and probably still today?
Yeah, it did take over my life for the better part of a year, where I was thinking about it all the time. Um, yeah, it's just, someone asked me today, they're like, "Oh, so when did you start that movie?" And I was like, "Well, I filmed it in July." And they're like, "Well, what was like pre-production like?" And I was like, "Oh, probably first started talking about it January of 2024." And they're like, "And it's just now coming out." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess that's like 2 years." It's kind of weird to think about it that way, but it doesn't feel like 2 years. Um, but yeah, I mean, dude, yeah, it's just it does have a way of taking over your life. And but in a way, that was the I experienced a turning point at one point in my career at Small Town Monsters, and that was, and you can see it. It's a big pivotal shift when I started making Bigfoot: The Road to Discovery, because if you watch it before, anything I did before, it's always, very much it's about Sasquatch, it's about whatever phenomenon is truly happening. And I think I discovered this while making Mysteries and Monsters was that's not the story. The story is the people. And that's always something that's interested to me. And that's why I think the Ape Canyon was such a big draw for myself, because in many ways, the Ape Canyon story bit with the recreations and everything, that was just, that's the least interesting part of the movie to me. Everything that's about Mark or Brad or going down to the cabin site, that's what's interesting to me, because that's more real to me. It's like, yeah, it's fun to do those recreations. Like I said, I got my dad, I got my brother, you know, they're all helping me. We're going up into the mountains here in Southern California. Yeah, you watch the first 3 minutes of this movie, and it's filmed in various states. You got footage from Washington, California, Ohio, different mountains in California. I mean, it's like every shot is in a completely different place, and you really can't tell. And that's what's cool about it.
Fantastic.
But yeah, that stuff is always fun, but that's not to me, that's not what the story is about, you know. And to me, the story is Mark Marcel. The story is, John Pickering is one of my favorite people. He's been texting me on the side, but John Pickering, I mean, I met him. I mean, that was totally kind of fate how that all lined up. I met him at a Bigfoot convention. I interviewed him in my hotel room. And I was like, I have to get you in this movie. And he's like, well, I'm not really, I'm like, shut up and just do it. And he's the one who, kind of cracked the code on Fred Beck and Ronald Beck's pamphlet. I mean, he interviewed Ronald Beck. I mean, that's huge. It's like, I don't know anyone else who got to do that. I mean, Mark didn't get to do that. He missed Ronald by a few years. So it's like, to me, John Pickering is like a huge part of the story. And that's what I mean. The story keeps going, and it draws in these people from all these different backgrounds. And it's like, and then I come along and I'm like trying to make a movie about it, and fate has its mysterious way of working that draws me into these people's orbit, and it's like,
Well, you're part of the story now too.
I
That's the
am.
thing. I think the observer becomes part of the story. And I think it's quite clear that the way Ape Canyon will be looked at going forward, there's no way that the story can't be talked about historically without talking about this documentary. And so Eli Watson has become part of the Ape Canyon mythology, which is cool.
I
It's,
guess
it's
so,
great.
yeah. I
It's
mean,
great.
dude, even we went down. What you see of Mark talking at the cabin site when my friend Tyler cut himself, that happened 100 years to the day of the attack. I mean, that's weirdly historic when you think about blood being shed, you know.
That
I
is
don't know,
great.
is
Yeah.
there something spiritual going on there, you know?
That's the woo again, Eli. That's the woo.
It is, dude. You can't escape it. But
No, it's really hard to escape it. There's the funny Temecula story. I will just put it up on screen for people who want to see it, that Flat Rockland mentioned before, so they can go and read it in the chat. I do have we're getting very close to wrapping, though. If you've got a few more minutes, I'll ask you another question from Squatch Mama, who is a wonderful supporter of the show. And Squatch Mama asks, what was your biggest challenge in turning this story into a cinematic experience?
I'm trying to verbalize it because I know exactly what it is. I think the original cut of Ape Canyon was about 2 hours long. And there's a lot of good bits, particularly with Brad, because I am a huge fan of Brad. And I hope. Oh, thanks, Jared. That's really nice. I think Brad making Brad work into the movie, because Brad is such a unique personality, and Mark is also a unique personality. And it's this is what I guess I'm trying to get at, is there's all these people with very unique personalities that have been brought together, and they're all united by this Ape Canyon story. And that can be hard to kind of piece together. And I think the biggest part of it, I'm stuck here with this 2 hour cut, and I'm trying to make changes. I'm trying to tweak it. And I send it to Seth, and I'm like, Seth, can you give me some feedback? And he's like, well, it's good. And I'm like, no, I need you to like put on your storyteller hat and like help me crack the code, because yeah, it's good, but it's like, I know it can be better. And he was like, well, why don't you rearrange the whole movie? And I was like, holy cow, I'd never even thought of that. And when I rearranged it, the story came together in a really natural and beautiful way. And so I have Seth really to thank for that. It's like you get lost as a storyteller in your own story, and it takes someone on the outside to be like, why don't you just do it this way? And you're like, wow.
That's great. No, Seth's such a talent, and it's great that you guys have such a wonderful working relationship. There's one final question. I was going to ask you something similar, and that was for your next documentary. Are you going after another historic Bigfoot story event or another mystery event? Maybe I was going to ask you, can you give us a hint of what your next project is going to be, or is it all under wraps?
Yeah, I can give you a very brief sneak peek.
Oh, nice.
It is something far more recent. Uh, only a couple months old. We're approaching the 1 year mark.
Wow.
And it's something topical, something I've never quite done before, and something that has a lot to do with fire. And that's all I'll say.
Man, everyone's going to be excited now. I'm excited. Man, Eli, it's so great to talk to you. This is the third time you've been on Talking Weird, and I sure as a devil hope it won't be the last. Where do people get a hold of where do they watch Ape Canyon? Even though I'll have links in the show notes, of course. Where do they keep track of what you're doing, your upcoming projects, and any other URLs or sites or anything you want to point anybody at?
Yeah, I think if you want to keep up with me, I haven't been as active on social media as of late, but you can check out my Instagram. That's the Eli Watson. Small Town Monsters is a great place. They're always putting out new content. What was I going to say? As for Ape Canyon itself, to watch that, it's available now on iTunes for rent or for purchase. I think YouTube TV, Google Play, and I think it will be streaming this Sunday on the Small Town Monsters YouTube channel. So I would say give that a whirl.
Fantastic. Well, man, it was a great joy talking to you, as it always is. Thank you so much for coming on Talking Weird again, Eli.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, man. It's been a blast.
Man, it always is talking to you. Until I talk to you again, Eli, which hopefully will be soon, hopefully at least after your next film comes out, we'll have you back. And until I talk to everybody else, which will be same weird time, same weird network, the Talking Weird network, not really, the Untold Radio Network. I don't have my own network. I'm on Untold Radio Network. Please keep it weird.
Thank you.